How did you wind up wrestling a few matches for ECW?
After my time in Mexico, I came back in '95, and as I said, I was trained by Dean Malenko, and met Eddie in Mexico, and Eddie and Dean were working a lot in Japan, so they were pretty tight at that point. And when ECW was doing a Florida loop, they decided to give me a call, for old time's sake, and say hello. And they asked me if I was interested in working some shows. So I said, hell yeah. So they spoke to Paulie and arranged the shows, and actually tagged up with Mikey Whipwreck, who's like the toughest bastard I've ever seen. And it was myself and Mikey versus Chris and Dean. And they just bumped his ass off. And basically nothing became of the 3-day loop because I wanted to get on with ECW. I was just somewhat reluctant to get involved in those hardcore matches because that was when, the hardcore initially made that big impact. The shovels and the chairs and going through tables and everything. And I just felt it was barbaric, and as it turned out to be later become garbage wrestling. And Dean and Chris basically told me that if I didn't want to do that type of wrestling, I had an option of just wrestling. But I don't believe that Paulie liked my style, or there was something about me that he didn't like, because he would never return my calls. What that turned out to be famous. Yeah, I didn't know at the time. I thought it was a personal thing. So, it was just a short-lived venture.
What are your thoughts on Paul Heyman as booker?
Obviously, he's a genius in his own mind, because he had an insight to a different type of wrestling, a hardcore wrestling, which was nice because it wasn't geared towards kids. So it wasn't geared towards your average wrestling fan. Basically, these are sick people that like this type of wrestling. I mean, to stand there and scream for blood and for somebody to, I think unconsciously they want to see somebody get hurt. They want to see Sabu do his dive and miss something. They want to see Van Damme do a spin kick and break somebody's jaw. And I think it was very, very smart on Paulie's part to see that and be able to capitalize on that. So as long as you can come up with a concept and a product in this business and it's successful, as long as you don't hurt people, you're smart, you're a genius. I mean, really.
From there, where did you go?
What did I do from there? Once again, I think I had a phase in my life where I was a bum for about a year or so. And things weren't well because I was working a job that I wasn't particularly fond of. I had money problems. And I spoke to Conan. No, to tell you the truth, watching wrestling back then, and watching guys like Haku and Jericho and Benoit and Dean Malenko, and a lot of the Mexican guys, Dandy, Silver King Parker, and all these guys I had worked with in Japan or Mexico. It's like, I'm not saying I'm better than those guys, but I know I've worked with them, so I felt that justified that I should be there with them. So I was close with Gangrel and Luna Vachon, who live in the same area as I do, and they were big support because they encouraged me to get in shape and go up there, at least try. So I went for a tryout. At that time they were doing the Universal tapings in Orlando, and they would be up there for a month, and that's when I met Conan again. After not seeing him for maybe a year and a half, and he was like, "Hey, where have you been, and what have you been doing?" And basically told him, "Listen, Carlos, I need to get a job, and I need for you to help me to get in here." And Carlos, being the man that he is and the friend that he is, basically promised me that by Christmas of that year, which was 97, that he would have me a contract with World Championship Wrestling. And I doubted him a little bit because that's a big statement for a guy to make, and he's not the owner of the company, But I knew he had stroke because he was bringing all these different guys, and Bischoff was listening to him at that time. So, the one thing he asked me to do was go back to Mexico because he had a company there that he had just started up called Promo Azteca. So I went there and worked for Conan there. And true to his word, it was October of '97. I signed my first deal. So,
what were your initial impressions of Eric Bischoff?
Somewhat intimidating, especially behind the scenes, because you knew that he was the man that put World Championship Wrestling on the map at that time with the new gimmicks and bringing in Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. And starting as literally a nobody there, because what I had done in Japan at that time and what I had done in Mexico meant absolutely nothing, because he wasn't aware of it. He was, I guess he wasn't a student of wrestling, how some people just study what's happening in Germany and England and Canada. He could care less. And I literally remember saying hello to him many times in the hallway, just being polite and courteous, because he was my boss and he was the guy that gave the green light for me to be hired. And I'd say hello, keep on walking. He wouldn't even acknowledge me. And I really don't, I'm not sitting here saying that he was being rude, but I just felt that he had a lot on his mind at that time, especially when ratings began to slip. And there was more, there was a lot of disgruntled wrestlers who weren't happy with the situation there. And being a booker is not an easy job, especially when you're in a company of that size with so much talent who are making millions of dollars a year. You have to justify everything you do. You have to use those guys. You have to answer to the higher uppers. I mean, it's not easy. Plus he was handcuffed in the sense that he had standards and practices regulating exactly what he could do and how much he could get away with. So it's not an easy position to be in.
How were you welcomed by the locker room?
I think that there were certain guys, because I remember having my first couple of matches, and guys that I admired for being great wrestlers, like Steve Regal, Brad Armstrong. I mean, they complimented me on my style. And then, slowly but surely, you make the rounds of wrestling each guy, because you're all saying, hey, is this guy normal? Is he stiff? Does he know what he's doing? Is he green? Does he remember? And, over the course of a period of time, you make the rounds wrestling different guys. The word is spread that, okay, Norman's fine. So as far as being a wrestler, I felt that I was accepted. As far as being in the social scene, there was a very few guys that I hung out with and traveled with. Basically, I hung out a lot with Rey Mysterio at that time and Juventud,
Right.
Juventus and Conan. And a couple of the American guys that I struck up a relationship with was like Disco Inferno, Kidman. That's basically it.
Right. What are your impressions when you first met Scott Hall and Kevin Nash?
Well, Scott Hall I'd met in Florida in
Right.
'86, this big Scott Hall. And it was gratifying to see guys who had started, because I know that he was in Minneapolis, and then he went here and then he ended up in Florida. So it was nice to see guys that had basically started at a lower level and had graduated to being world champions and millionaires and household names. So I had known Scott. I had heard a lot about Scott Hall and Kevin Nash being assholes, arrogant, egotistical, and Conan and Rey Mysterio were pretty tight with Kevin Nash. And the first time that I met Kevin, I was in Michigan, and I drove back from a town with Kevin, Rey Mysterio, and Conan, and I was just dumbfounded as to how smart Kevin Nash was. Not just about the business, but about life in general. And he impressed upon me his values as being a father, because he's got a son, and which his son is his whole life. So I was very, very impressed with Kevin as a person. But professionally, I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. You don't become a success in this business by an accident. I mean, he knows what he's doing. He knows what's hip. He knows what's over. He, as being Kevin Nash, is cool. He's hip. He can be cocky. He's arrogant, but he's so quick-witted and funny to be around. He's just hilarious. He's one of those guys. If you're sitting down having a beer with him, you just laugh your ass off all night. He's just hilarious.
Watch thousands of exclusive shoot interviews right now on TitleMatchNetwork.com.